we have breaking news that we're following in Sean Diddy Combs' racketeering and sex trafficking trial. In just moments, Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, is set to retake the stand and face what we expect to be her final round of questioning under cross-examination. Court currently is on a short lunch break, but if you recall, the judge previously said that he wanted Ventura's cross-examination to wrap up before lunch today. Prosecutors have said that Ventura, who's nearly 9 months pregnant, could soon go into labor.
Over the last hour, the defense has been asking Ventura more about her 2018 rape allegation against Combs, Ventura's drug use, her mental health problems, and a 2014 threat that she made to a man who claimed he had seen a sexually explicit tape of her, also raised in court. The defense at one point asking Ventura, quote, "Do you still have love for him?" referring to Combs. And Ventura answered by saying, quote, "I have love for the past and what it was." Let's bring in Court TV anchor and former prosecutor Julie Grant right now. Okay, Julie, what do you think of what you have been reading about what the defense has brought up today?
Brianna and Boris, good afternoon to you both. The defense is right when they say that Cassie Ventura is the most critical witness to this case. The defense is doing its job because what they're trying to do is bring out that she's not a perfect person, that they're saying she might have wanted to engage in these freak-offs on more than one occasion, that she was willingly staying in this relationship with Sean Combs, even though she knew that it was an abusive one. They're bringing out things that she said to other people that are less than flattering. All that being said, the government doesn't need to have a perfect victim. What the government has done this week essentially is establishing the sex trafficking crimes that they've charged Sean Combs with. And I would argue that they are well on their way to proving these crimes. A lot of people don't realize that with sex trafficking, you don't have to have movement anywhere. You don't have to go across state lines. A lot of times people confuse it with human smuggling. Here, somebody can be trafficked in their own home. All you really need is someone providing somebody else for that commercial sex act. And when I say commercial, I mean anything of value, not even necessarily money, to be given by force or coercion. And so Cassie Ventura has done her job this week for the government, and now the defense is doing its job to try to make it seem as if she wanted to be in this relationship and that what happened in those freak-offs was not coerced.
Julie, the government, or rather the defense, asking her about mental health treatment that she received, this therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. Why would they go with that line of questioning? How does that benefit their defense of Combs?
Great question, Boris, because it could go to her credibility and her memory's reliability. And so here they're trying to paint her out as somebody who may not be remembering all the details as they actually occurred. Maybe somebody whose memory isn't all that great. They want the jury to think, well, maybe she's somewhat of a basket case after all of this, and maybe what she's telling us we can't rely on because maybe it's not exactly true. So by them wanting to go through the therapy she's been through, there was a mention of EMDR that deals with eye movements and recalling memories. They're going through all of that to try to make it seem as if, okay, maybe Cassie Ventura isn't emotionally stable. Maybe her mental recollection isn't quite right. And then we can argue later to the jury in closing arguments that they can't rely on that. So that's exactly what the defense is trying to get at with those lines of questioning, Boris.
I wonder what you think, and also how the prosecution is going to have to respond to that. We should be clear, this particular type of therapy is considered a leading therapy for veterans processing PTSD. I remember talking to a Virginia Tech survivor. School shooting survivors use this very successfully. And Cassie Ventura testified it helps recount memories and process them. She said that if there was a time when you were getting beat up in a room and couldn't walk out, you would reimagine it in a way that you were actually able to leave the room. Do you see this potentially backfiring on the defense?
Oh, Brianna, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, you are exactly right. The defense needs to be really careful what they're doing here because she is a victim. She is a victim. She has put herself out there and saying that she survived these horrific instances of rape, of other assaultive behaviors, some of which we've seen evidence of. on that videotape that CNN exclusively obtained and then broadcast, and thank goodness for that. And so with the defense trying to go down this road, trying to attack her therapy, the government's going to get right back up there and say, well, the only reason she needed to go to therapy and seek EMDR and the other types of therapy was because of the actions of your client, Combs' attorney team. So they're going to go right back at it and say that had she not been so brutally traumatized, she wouldn't have had to seek therapy, and that's a good thing. And certainly anybody on that jury who's ever been to therapy or knows anything about it, they're going to be thinking about how Cassie Ventura could be being traumatized right now, again, in having to relive all of the various questioning for days from both sides. So you're right, Brianna. This is a slippery slope that the defense team is on right now with her.
Julie Grant, great to have you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Let's bring in attorney Renato Stabile to talk about this further. Renato, thanks for being with us. I wonder what you make of how the cross-examination went for the defense.
Look, I think it went about as well as it could have gone. They did what they needed to do in terms of confronting her with her text messages that undermine her claim that she was being coerced. But remember, the prosecution is going to clean a lot of that up right now on their redirect. They're going to go back over some of those text messages. They're not going to go through all of it. Remember, they said they're only going to spend about an hour, and everybody wants her to get off the stand by the end of today. But they're going to give her an opportunity now to explain why it is that at the same time that she's having these text exchanges that, you know, some are loving, and some of the things she did in terms of setting up these encounters, she was nevertheless being coerced.
How hard is that for a jury to be convinced of, the idea that because there are some times where she may seem like a willing participant, and then there are times where she has clearly said that she doesn't want to do it. How does a jury receive that sort of changing over time?
Look, I think the problem here really for the jury and for the defense is that, you know, regardless, now look, the defense is going to say she wasn't coerced, but there's still been a lot of really ugly testimony. I mean, testimony about beatings and abuse and threats and all kinds of crazy things. And, you know, you would have to believe that the jury can separate those horrific things out and accept that despite all of that, he technically is not a sex trafficker, which is what he's on trial for. That is extremely difficult for the jury, for any human being to do. So I think that's really the problem here for P. Diddy is, you know, jurors being able to separate those two things, even though legally, technically, the defense, you know, is going to try and make the point that it doesn't satisfy the elements of sex trafficking, but extremely tough.
Yeah, I mean, given some of the lurid details, you wonder how a jury is going to receive that sort of information. I do want to get your thoughts on how you think the prosecution is going to approach redirect. They're saying that it's going to last about an hour. What do you think will come of it?
Yeah, look, it's going to be very quick. They're only going to hit the high points where they think, you know, the defense maybe scored some points. You know, I think she's done quite a lot of damage here. It's pretty clear why they called her as their, you know, one of their early witnesses, because the damage that's been inflicted, regardless of whether or not they make out the elements of the charge, but just the overall testimony of what they heard about him just is going to hang over the rest of this trial.
And I wonder, as we're looking ahead here, we're going to ultimately be hearing from one of her former friends. How do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, you know, I think they're going to call one of her former friends to corroborate a lot of what she said. I mean, I think it's corroborated in the videos, it's corroborated in the text messages, but I think the former friend is going to corroborate that she didn't want to do these things, maybe that she confided in her as to her state of mind, that she felt she was being forced into these things. So they'll probably have some contemporaneous evidence of what she was going through while these things were happening, despite what is in the text messages.
All right, Renato, thank you so much for your insight. Renato Stabile, we appreciate it.